And let me begin by asking you, what's your take on this whole incident that happened yesterday at Nyinahin?
All right. Very good morning to you, Dave, and good morning to your listeners and viewers. My initial impression and contribution is that whatever happened at Nyinahin, to be very honest with you, was very unwarranted. It was unnecessary. It shouldn't have happened in the first place. And I think that the lack of discretion, proper use of discretion on the part of the military, has resulted in something which otherwise could have been prevented. And probably the military would have been able to get more of public support and would have even gained more social alliances among the populace within the Nyinahin enclave and even across the country if proper discretion had been deployed and used. And so my initial contribution is that, look, whatever has happened there was unwarranted and was very unnecessary. And the military should do a proper introspection and begin to review the way they engage civilians in terms of how they deal with civilians in this country.
Before we talk about, the main action and behavior of the military leading to the injuries and, of course, the death, what is your take on the use of camouflage? What does the law say about it? And why is the military so enthused about making sure people do not wear this thing? Obviously, it's not a military uniform. Some of them are T-shirts or singlets or shorts or caps or sandals. So what is the fuss? What does the law say about it? What's the big deal?
Well, within the military, there is some service regulations that speaks to the wearing of uniforms. For instance, there is what we call the Restriction on Use of Military Uniforms and Equipment Act of 1967, which was actually enacted to prevent unauthorized use of military attire and equipment. Okay, and if you look at that law, the primary aim of the law was basically to safeguard the integrity of the armed forces and also prevent what we call impersonation. So if you look at the posture of the military over the period on the use of camouflage uniforms and things and other equipment and those things that have this kind of military regalia, it derives from this kind of regulation that was enacted some years back. And as I said earlier on, basically the motive of this law was to prevent people from impersonating military officers and using the uniform to commit certain acts that did not align with what the military stood for. So it's basically a way to protect the service. That is why they are always very strong on people who use either exactly the same kind of camouflage uniforms or something that mimics those kind of camouflage uniforms. So it is something that is derived in regulations within the service. The only problem I have over the period is how the military has sought to, as it were, enforce those regulations, especially when it comes to, civilians and people that seems to, flout that kind of regulation. And that is where I think has generated this kind of theory that we've seen yesterday. I think.
But Doc, indeed, help me. If I'm wearing a camo shorts or flip-flop or singlet, you can easily tell that this is not necessarily a military uniform or attire. So what is the big deal?
Yes, you see, let me tell you, one part of their regulation was that individuals are actually prohibited from wearing or using military uniforms or equipment or related materials unless they fall into certain specific categories. So you see, what happens is that their focus, as I've seen over the period, is not really even about people who are just wearing a camouflage uniform, but something that they feel is even related to the camouflage uniform that mimics what the military wear. And for me, what I think we have to do going forward is to get the military to explain and probably expatiate on those provisions within the regulation to define specifically the kind of camouflage they are talking about. Because, for instance, look, if you go to certain boutiques, there are certain camouflage kind of, military style uniforms and dresses that are there people wear on the street. And you will see that they are camouflage, but they are not really that of the military, So now, if a policeman or a military should see you and decide to accost you and probably assault you for that, it becomes very challenging. So it is a challenge I'm also throwing to the military going forward, that they need to probably define the remit and the limits of that regulation and make sure that it is very clear and that people will be able to know the nature of the camouflage attire that they are supposed to wear and those that they are not supposed to wear. If it is exactly the same as what the military have been using, then that is where we may have a problem. Because as I know, when it comes to camouflage across the country, across the world, in terms of the militaries across the world, there are variations in the way the designs are. And if you look at the Ghana's camouflage as compared to what happens in Nigeria, there's a huge difference in the way it is even structured. If you compare that to what is even in the United States, what the United States military wear, it is very different. So how would a Ghanaian, army or officer see me wearing probably a camouflage from the US and begin to attack me, especially when it is not mimicking what is being used here in this country. So it's a gray area. I think that probably the military will have to come in and properly define the remit of these regulations so that citizens and the civilians will be able to know the extent to which they can use these uniforms to prevent these kind of scuffles as we've been seeing them play out over the period in this country.
So whilst we are waiting that to come our way, let's look at the shooting incident itself. And like I said yesterday, you and I had conversations. And let's join us on our Facebook page right now on Love in the Morning. Get to see what we're talking about. Get to see it for yourself and draw your own conclusions. When you get there, like our page, share the video and drop comments as well for us. So looking at the shooting incident itself, Doc, if you watch the incidents that began, at one point in time, the military were amongst the youth who were on their way to the cemetery.
Yes.
The way they were even holding their rifle, to me, was a bit worrying. Then later in the video, you could see and hear the warning shots that they were giving. At one point in time in that same video, they were retreating to their truck. And then you could hear the young youth of the area say, soldier for the Janio. Then they board their truck. Does it make sense to you that at a point where you had boarded your truck, then you shoot into the crowd directly, killing this Akwesila gentleman and injuring 3? What do you make of it all?
Yes, that is what I said earlier on, that everything that happened there suggests to me a lack of proper discretion in the exercise of the use of force. And I think that, to be very blunt, this thing shouldn't have happened, as I've already said, because if you are even retreating, that means that you are actually getting out of the situation. You are moving out of the escalation, so that proper peace could be restored within the area. There was no sense, as it were, in shooting into the crowd, especially a crowd that is not. If I should compare whatever they were holding with what the military was holding, it was not comparable in any sense of the word. So I'm thinking that whoever did that should be subjected to some form of criminal process. We should. As you know me over the period, I'm not very much, enthused about some of these military and the police service, tribunals that they set in terms of subjecting their people to disciplinary procedures. I feel that some of this lack of discretion, we should subject them to the criminal processes of this country so that we can better deal with them and isolate that cloak, of protection that they enjoy, which sometimes empower some of them to misbehave and do the things that they do. Because, if you look at the whole situation, you have already escalated the situation. For some reasons, you were getting out of the place for calm to be restored. There was no sense in shooting, especially if the person was not armed and the person didn't pose any sense of danger to the people there. So I think that on that score, more investigation needs to be done, and the soldier who did that probably will have to be subjected to the criminal procedures of this country for murdering that individual.
I'll come back to what you just landed on. Because I want us to explore the issues of investigations, whether it should be done by the military or the police. Because as we speak, per the statement released by the police yesterday, they're asking that the military hands over the military person to them. And so we'll come back to that shortly. But how would you describe the Ghanaian security personnel, from the police to the military, having at the back of our mind some of these things that have happened in the past? Would you say that they're trigger happy? And would you say how would you say this is impacting on the image of the police and the military?
Well, I think that over the period we've had certain situations that have happened with the police and the military that I've talked about, especially in the way they relate to civilians. Okay, because I feel that for the police, for instance, there is a lot of anger management problems that I think the police, for instance, face over the period. And I've suggested in my radio discussions and advocacy about enhancing, the kind of training we give, for instance, the police in managing civilians and managing crowd and managing, crime scenes and all that. But when it comes to the military, I think that over the years there has been this perception, within the military that they are a force, and once they are a force, they must exhibit that kind of trait when they are dealing with the civilians. Okay, I'm a barracks boy. I live in the barracks, grew up in the barracks. My father was an army officer, and trust me, it is something that I know has persisted within the force over the period, especially the way they relate to civilians. Okay, so I think that in a democracy, and if you go to other countries, as I know of other countries and their militaries, in proper democracies, what they do is to build proper trust between civilians and the military. Okay, so that militaries don't go into areas and go and create, escalation and go and create even security challenges for everybody and just shoot indiscriminately into crowds and killing people. What they do is to build proper, military civilian relations where they can even get the backing and the support of the civilians in the discharge of their duty. And now what they are doing, if you look at the video, what they are doing is causing some kind of public anger towards the force and actually bringing the name of the Ghana Armed Forces into disrepute and making people not even respect the military, because whatever was happening there was not a security challenge for which the military had to intervene in the way they did. I thought that, as a force that is supposed to build that kind of public, support, even if somebody was wearing a camouflage that was against your regulation, it would have been much better to have even singled out the person, probably draw him closer to where your vehicles were and engage him in a nice way. Probably you could have even used that opportunity as a force to educate, the people there about the use of such kind of military regalia and military attack, so that, going forward, you were able to get the public trust, you build that public support, and even get social license in terms of what you do as a force.
But Doc, Leo has a question for you. But where you are right now, saying that they should have invited the person in their attire to their vehicle and all that, we are told that when they got down and they asked the guy to remove the camouflage uniform, he did. He obliged. Then they went on and said, remove the trousers. And he says, if I remove it, I'll be almost naked, so I will not. So the guy obliged. So it doesn't make sense that they went on to do what they did. Leo, your question.
Because if you are told the person to remove it, and he did the first one, the top one, and he's left with that one, and he's telling that, please, if I should do that, probably I'll be naked, and you still insist that you want him to be naked, then that means that we are on a course to basically humiliate the person. Okay, and that is something that we have to question. That's why I was saying that in a democracy, the military must find a way to better relate to civilians. Okay, if the person is even doing something that is against your regulation, in this case, wearing of a camouflage, you could have just drawn the person and probably get him into one of the kiosks there, and those shops there, and try to get him some shorts or something, and then let him remove it, and then you take the wear and then remove. In that case, you would have prevented any insecurity situation in that place. You would have secured lives and property, and you would have been better guardians of property and the lives of people, rather than indiscriminately showing, bravado because you have weapons and you think that you have to instill fear in people. Look, once the military continues to do that, one, they are weakening the force. They are also going to lose a lot of public sympathy, and people will begin to challenge their authority, because at some point in time, people will begin to stand up to them. You have weapons, but you cannot kill everybody. So they have to be very careful. And I think that as someone who is a friend of the military and even a son of the military, I think that, look, they have to revise the way they relate to the public in terms of helping build the military as a force that the public really supports.
Doc, my question again on the uniform bit. So if a military person sees somebody, if they insist that nobody should wear anything that looks like a military uniform, shouldn't there be a procedure, a lay down procedure, that maybe if you are wearing this, then you have to take you through this process for whatever thing to be corrected? And two, is it any soldier's duty to see anybody's anywhere on them krum baby yasuma so goto bia ne mrakra ohuso bi ahye soldier tade a wose Is it like that?
So Leo, that is why I was telling you earlier on that the military will have to come out and properly define the remit of their regulation. Okay, because now what is happening is that it looks like anybody that sees anybody on the street wearing anything they feel, okay, it's camouflage or military related, compounds on the person begin to act. Okay, so the regulations as it were, and even how it's supposed to be enforced, has not been clearly defined. So that now it is being given to anybody who thinks or who is a soldier. And now the person will have to now have a discretion as to whether if I meet somebody wearing anything looking like a military uniform, I should attack the person or I should find a way to discipline the person. And then that is basically jungle law. So I think that it is very important that going forward it should be properly defined. Okay, the remit of that law in terms of even the nature of the military regalia, in terms of who can even enforce that, and the processes for which, if somebody is even found wearing it, what processes are we supposed to take the person through? That should be properly defined. We don't leave it to members of the force just like that, because especially when anybody, as you were saying, could meet anybody, and now it is now based on discretion for the person to say, oh, if I look at this camouflage, it looks like our uniform. Young man, come here and come and remove. No, it shouldn't be like that. Even the nature of the regalia, the nature of the camouflage and all those, it should be properly defined. What colors should they be in? Is it just any military patterned camouflage? Those are the things that we have to look at, because I've already said that across the world, as I know about the military, even the nature of the camouflage differs. Okay, even sometimes the colors even differ. So if somebody is just wearing a camouflage style dress, and just by exercise of improper discretion, somebody now sees the person and says, I'm a soldier, and you are wearing a camouflage that looks like I was so stripped naked, then we are basically in the jungle. So I think that going forward, we need to properly define those regulations. Let us know the remit of the regulation, who is supposed to enforce, and then develop the proper procedure for the enforcement of these things. So it's a concern that I really share with you. And I think that going forward, if the military will really want to get the public support that they've enjoyed over the period from us, they need to be able to sit up and do some of these things and engage the civilians, engage the public, because trust me, I know very well that a lot of these things, there are people within the rural areas, even in the urban areas, who are not even aware that there are even regulations that even exist when it comes to the use of this kind of military attire and regalia.
At this point in time, what would you say? I mean, in terms of the fact that the police say they began an investigations into the matter, and that they're giving assurances to the public that they should be rest assured and relaxed that they will do a good job. What are expectations? How should this whole thing be handled?
Well, I think that over the period, when it comes to the way the service have dealt with, and I'm not talking even of just the military, even the police, when issues come and they have to, it involve their own people, the way they handle it, they subject them to the service inquiries, and at the end, either they are just their ranks are reduced, and then some of them are just giving some minimal sentences, and then they find themselves back into the service and all that. I think that this shouldn't be, the usual thing that we have been used to over the period. Because look, I know all too well over the period, very serious military civilian engagements that have happened that have resulted in the lives of people. And I see a lot of these guys who were charged, still wearing their uniforms and going about their normal duties as if nothing really happened. And for me, these are the kind of things that I've always advocated. Because what some of these guys do, as I know, is that because they know they have this, cloak of institutional protection, they are able to commit some of these crimes and then go scot-free, because they know that there is a broader institutional protection for them when they do these things. Okay, and that is what I have been advocating. That look, we must have a strict liability insurance where people who in the service who do some of these things, and in the forces who do some, because as I've said, there is a clear lack of improper, exercise of discretion. It had nothing related to the job that they were supposed to be doing. Okay, so I'm thinking that for this kind of lack of improper discretion, the perpetrators must be, be taken out of the group and be subjected to the criminal procedures of this country, rather than using the institutional protection for those people. So that has been my argument and my advocacy over the period, so that we can better have justice for people that suffer some of these things, in the hands of our security people, and then we can better reform, either the police or the military, especially in the way they relate to the public. So I'm not expecting anything less of that or short of that. I want proper investigation done. The police must make sure that they go through all the forensics and all the crime scene investigation and everything that they have to get their dossier ready, send it to court, and make sure that whoever is responsible for this is held accountable. If not, look, we will always have some of these things happening over the period. You remember recently some of these things happening in Tamale, even in Nyinahin, some few years ago, some of these things were happening where people were severely maimed and people's lives were basically destroyed because of how some military people misbehave, towards the civilians. And I think that we should not allow these things to fester.
I would describe it as lack of emotional intelligence. And of course, we know what has happened up north before, where military officers say, well, their phones are missing, and then they get into town and beat up people looking for a phone.
Exactly.
Now, before you go, my final question to you is this. I haven't seen any statement from the military. Isn't that worrying? Because if it had happened the other way around, that a military person went somewhere and let's say a mob in a community attacked a military person and killed a person, I'm sure they might have released a statement by now. Here we're talking again about a human life, and yet the military is silent several hours after the incident. What is that communicating?
That's very, very unfortunate, because this is something that came up, I think, yesterday, right? And
yesterday morning.
At least I was just hoping that I'll wake up to some kind of news or probably some kind of statement from the military, which as of yet we've not had it. It's something that the police have taken. Probably I want to give them the benefit of the doubt that because the police have issued a statement and have taken over the investigation, maybe it is the reason why I'm just giving them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it's the reason why the military has not, issued a statement. But I'm thinking that, look, as a good gesture, because me, as a friend of the security agencies, I really want the security agencies to have a certain image in the minds of the public. We must properly brand them, and in doing that, their actions and inactions are key in doing that. So some of these statements, in terms of commiserating with the family and all that, are part of the processes that we can use to build the image of either the military or the police. And I'm thinking that if they've not done that as yet, as I presume, please, I'm just encouraging the authorities, the military high command and all those people that are involved to make sure that, look, they find a way to reach out to the community, allay their fears and build proper military-civilian relations within the Nyinahin area. Because as I know, the military have been using that place for their operations for some time. And I know that they will still be using that place going forward. Please, let's try and build proper community relations and get the public support and the trust of the civilians and the public.
Very much for your time with us this morning. We're grateful to you. And at this point in time, we're going to share with you a sound bite where you would hear after the military have retreated and gotten onto their track, and they fired into the crowd, killing this Akwesi Lala, aka Kushivi. You would hear in the sound that we're going to share with you right now. Here's the sound.